Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Meehan, and in this lesson I will go over maintaining homeostasis through something called a feedback loop. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to differentiate between negative and positive feedback mechanisms. You will also be able to explain examples in which your body maintains homeostasis through feedback mechanisms. Let's do a quick do now. On the prompt on the screen, you'll see a link to the following Plix activity regarding homeostasis. Arrange this organizer on the right, and then check your work by completing the challenge questions. If you don't get all of the challenge questions correct the first time, try it again until you do. Okay, let's go over what you saw in this simulation. This is actually an example of a feedback loop. The initial stimulus experienced by the body would be a rise in body temperature. As a result, a receptor or receptors in your skin and brain would sense some type of change from the normal. This will result in a signal, some type of command from your brain, which causes a response. Your body's response in this case would be the creation of sweat to help cool you down through evaporation and your blood vessels dilating. This response leads to a decrease in body temperature. We are reversing the initial stimulus, which is that rise in body temperature. So since we are reversing something, it is called a negative feedback, and you will see more examples of this throughout the lesson. Next, please take a moment to watch the video clip that will show you more examples of homeostasis in your body. Click on the link in the prompt, and then come back here. So in the video clip, you saw some examples of negative feedback in your body. A negative feedback loop counteracts, meaning it opposes, whatever the original action was. So the classic example would be if your body temperature starts to rise, the opposite would be to make it lower. This would inhibit the action from continuing to occur. Most examples of homeostasis are an example of a negative feedback loop. There are also positive feedback loops that happen in the body. This is the opposite of a negative feedback loop, since what would happen is whatever the initial stimulus is, it would be amplified or increased from the original action. This causes more of that initial action to occur. Let's try some practice. Here we see an example of a feedback loop. Both sides represent the same type of feedback loop, even though there are opposite stimuli happening. On this side, we see a decrease in body temperature, which causes heating mechanisms to be activated. In this case, we can go with shivering. The shivering helps increase your body temperature. Since our original action was a decrease in body temperature, which is then counteracted by an increase in body temperature, this would be an example of a negative feedback loop. Don't get confused about what the original action is. Even though we're decreasing and increasing temperature. We are focusing on the opposite happening from this initial action. So when the opposite happens, we have a body temperature decrease followed by a body temperature increase. That would be a negative feedback loop. The same thing on this side. Here we have the opposite happening. The body temperature is increasing. Cooling mechanisms activate in the form of sweating to help cool you down through evaporation. Then the opposite happens from the initial action. We're going from an increase in body temperature to a decrease, back to that set point of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So since, again, we are opposing that initial action, it is a negative feedback loop. Here is an overall example to help you understand what a positive feedback loop would be. Let's say you're taking a walk down the hall and you smile at someone. This means that you must look and feel good. As you smile, others see you smile. They then begin to mimic, and they smile as well. Now they also look and feel good. By the time you get to the end of the hall, everybody's now smiling. So you went from one person smiling you to everybody smiling in the hall. Since we amplified the initial action of just you smiling, this would be a positive feedback loop. Let's practice with some more examples. A series of questions will now pop up. You want to identify these examples as either a negative feedback mechanism or a positive feedback mechanism. Remember, if it is a negative feedback mechanism, the response of the body or the response overall would counteract or oppose the original action. A positive feedback response is the opposite. You have an initial action and you increase that action. That would be an example of positive feedback.